Next, we have an update on Workforce Investment Board from Adam Jones.
Thank you for allowing me to come before you today, Commissioners, Administrator Raybolt, and Assistant Administrator Eigel. Thank you for allowing me to come here. They want to provide you with an update on your board today and give you an idea. We'll start with talk about three different things. We'll start with some of our accomplishments, what we've done since July, since you brought me on board, and then two initiatives, critical initiatives that are facing our board today, which are local workforce area designation and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA. So we'll begin with an overview of some of our accomplishments. Got a couple slides here. The first of which we were involved in the Washington, D.C. fly-in representing workforce development. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail later, what the takeaway was from that. But essentially, in this event, we had influenced some workforce process when it comes to the designation component. We're also leading the recruitment effort for the Liberty Center in Butler County, which is a $350 million retail office residential development. They expect to have 3,500 jobs by 2018. And again, we are in coordination with Ohio Means Jobs, Butler County, leading this effort for the entire complex. We've also been involved in the City of Hamilton StarTech site selection process. This is bringing 680 jobs to the region with $16 million annual payroll. This was something that was, I call this in my honeymoon period. This was a lengthy process, but when I was in the 2-week leaving Butler County and coming here, this was something that came from the Dayton Development Coalition, the Jobs Ohio partner. And knowing that I was coming into this role, they asked if I would be a part of this. So this is something that started back in July of 2014, and then I think it was in February of this year was announced, and so we had been involved in that process all along. Also, something that you're familiar with is the Southwest Ohio Regional Aerospace and Manufacturing Job Fair. We completed that in January. And then we've also, kind of tying in with the StarTech, we've have been involved in several different site prospect meetings with Jobs Ohio partners from our south, Ready Cincinnati, Regional Economic Development Initiative, and the Dayton Development Coalition to our north. Continuing.
I managed to get to the aerospace job.
Oh, I'm sorry?
I managed to get to the aerospace job fair. That was well done.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. It wasn't all me. That we had a lot of great partners with our Ohio Means Job staff here in Clermont, Butler, and Warren. We really had, that wouldn't have been successful without the staff we had involved in that. So I appreciate that, and I'll make sure that's passed along. Thank you. We've also established what I call Workforce University, which is a learning tool for our board members. At the beginning of each board meeting, we will talk about either some policy or process or something that our board needs to know about that they may not have known about, and it's a way to try to further engage the board. So at the December board meeting, for example, we had our budget presentation. So we had our contracted fiscal agent come out and explain to board members how are we funded. It comes through the Department of Labor, then to the state carves off a percentage, then we're given 3 different allocations through programs. So trying to explain to our board members exactly how it is we're funded and how that relates to our business. Then we've been involved in recruitment of new board members. We've had policy meetings with congressional representatives and state house representatives. One of our Ohio Means Job Centers received national recognition for their involvement in a regional apprenticeship program that was sponsored by a grant from the Employers First entity. And then we've also been involved in some student mock interview events as well. And this is something that I've engaged each county to say, so Live Oaks, Warren County Career Center, and Butler Tech, how can the board be involved in this? Because getting at the point where students are leaving those technical or career centers or getting ready to, what I was exposed to was the broad range of students who some came in a suit, or not in a suit, but a dress shirt and tie, and were very well prepared, and others didn't take it as seriously. So you've got that opportunity to really say, all right, here's what you need to be aware of, being able to coach and guide those youth, and then provide constructive criticism or praise for those that did it well too. So it's a great opportunity to be involved in that. It's something I'd like to spearhead throughout each individual county.
You mentioned, Live Oaks, which of course we have that in Clermont, but what about Grant Career Center?
No, I haven't reached out to the Grant Career Center, but I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then finally, and this is more related to the board itself, but we did rebrand the board with a new name, new logo, and a new website recently. We've developed and approved our strategic plan in December. We've updated our bylaws, which were horribly out of date. We've revised our committee structure to complement our strategic plan and further achieve our goals, or help us achieve our goals. Andy Kukta, who's in the audience today, is actually chairing one of the new committees, the Board Development Committee. We've also introduced electronic voting for our subcommittees. We've revised our policy manual for each county. Just to give you an idea, our policies hadn't been updated in probably 9 months. So some counties had updated policies, another county may have had an old policy. They were individual, they weren't combined, so we did that and made it a little more efficient, if you will. Again, some low-hanging fruit, but we've revised our sub-grant agreement with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services in our local area. And then we've also renewed our fiscal agent contract that expanded the statement of work, but that came without an increase in the cost of to the contract. So now that we've gone over some of our accomplishments, we'll go into one of the first of the issues that's facing our board, and that's local workforce area designation. So we'll start with some background. Under the current legislation, WIOA, the Workforce Investment Act, the state was supposed to designate or recertify areas I think it was every 2 or 3 years. And in Ohio, that hasn't occurred ever. So the Department of Labor finally hit Ohio with an audit finding that said, okay, when we transition to WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, you're going to designate your areas or you're not going to receive federal workforce funds. So the governor, in order to receive those funds in consultation with the local elected officials, such as yourselves, will designate the local workforce areas, or are responsible for that. Now, ultimately, consultation, if you want to look at Webster's dictionary, that doesn't mean agreement. So he just needs to consult with you, but ultimately he can make the decision. So let's talk about designation now. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's back up. Don't we already have local workforce development or designation areas? Isn't that later in your slides, the map back here?
That's what we're going to talk about. Yeah, we are currently a workforce area as we are under WIA, but those
Okay.
need to be redesignated under the new legislation, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So that's what we're going to speak about now, is the redesignation, if you will.
Okay.
So there are two types of designation. There's initial, which we call automatic, and then discretionary as well. So let me give you a little background on why it's important, or why we want initial. So if we receive initial or automatic designation, then the governor can't come back and say, you're going to merge with another area or another county, which has been kind of the talk about merging us with Hamilton County. If we have initial status, then basically we are protected. If we don't have initial status, if we have to apply discretionary, then the governor can come back and say, Butler, Clermont, Warren County, you guys need to break up, or Clermont, you go with Brown, Butler, Warren, you go with Hamilton, or something like that. So if it's discretionary, we are not guaranteed that we will be the same area essentially tomorrow as we are today, tomorrow being when WIOA takes effect. So the eligibility criteria for initial designation, the area must be essentially be designated an area within the previous 2-year period and remaining the same composition. So what that means is that Area 12, Butler, Clermont, Warren was in existence as an area for the past 2 years. And when we apply for redesignation, we are also applying as Butler, Clermont, Warren. So we have to look the same tomorrow as we do today. Sustained fiscal integrity, so that means that we haven't had to pay any money back, which we haven't, and then performed successfully over the last 2 program years. So where does our area fall with designation? Well, we haven't had any fiscal issues. We have met or exceeded all 9 performance measures in program year 12. We have met or exceeded 8 of the 9 performance measures in program year 13. We have failed 1 measure in that second measurement year. And we're going to speak about that in a moment as well. So due to the failed single metric, our area has been defined by the Ohio Office of Workforce Development as discretionary designation, which means we don't have that protection. So now we're going to talk for a moment just about that 1 failed measure, and then we'll move on from there. there was an issue with the source data that the state used in the performance report by the state, where that data was that they used for performance was actually inaccurate. And in Clermont County, we hadn't caught that until after I think it was a 2-week window to evaluate the data had expired. We did catch it and went back to the state after that window had expired and said, hey, look, the data that you graded us on was incorrect. We've looked at this, we've done our due diligence, and have determined that we actually would have met that metric instead of failed it. So we've made 4 appeals to the Office of Workforce Development, 2 of them by me personally, 1 by the Board of Commissioners from each county, and then 1 by our business membership in the board. The Ohio Office of Workforce Development has denied each appeal. So now this takes us to the flying. I said I'd mention the flying to DC. When I had met with them, the purpose, when we did the flying, I met with the Department of Labor to discuss this issue. And what they had said is, it sounds to us like Ohio is not interpreting policy correctly. In order to, the definition of failed a performance measure is actually to have not met it for 2 consecutive years. Since we only did not meet it for 1 year, the Department of Labor says you are eligible, or you should be eligible for initial designation. Again, that would give us the protection so that we would still remain as Butler, Clermont, Warren counties. So basically what that means is we've had some discussions with the Office of Workforce Development. I've had some discussions with the Department of Labor following this. And as recently as last Wednesday, the Office of Workforce Development has said, yes, we're aware of the Department of Labor's interpretation, but we're not changing our stance at this moment. So where does that leave us? The Department of Labor says we should be eligible for initial designation. Ohio says you are not eligible for initial designation. So where do we go from here? Well, first, let's begin with the immediate next steps, and then we'll talk about that. I'm not going to go through this entire slide. I'll paraphrase much of this. But the Office of Workforce Development has laid out a process by which all counties must request designation, whether you're initial or whether you're discretionary. And in this application, counties who wish to be an area must identify how they meet the following 6 criteria, and this is what I'll summarize. It's basically that that our counties have similar labor markets, that we're consistent with the economic development regions which are defined by the state, that we have the resources to administer the program, be it financial and educational, and that we also align or complement the goals of the Ohio State Unified Plan. So since Butler, Clermont, and Warren counties have all expressed interest in remaining as the same workforce area, I've completed this packet on behalf of each county. This was shared to the Executive Committee of the Workforce Investment Board the week of May 11th. It was reviewed, and then we had a comment period at our Executive Committee meeting, which was May 15th. Gave a high-level overview of that packet, and it was given the go-ahead by the Executive Committee. Then it was sent to the appropriate county staff for Board of Commissioner approval the week of May 18th. And the applications, again, must be submitted by May 29th, so this Friday. Now, the Office of Workforce Development is granting us a 2-week extension period to provide the resolutions from each Board of County Commissioners. I do have to have the application submitted by the 29th, but they're giving us a little grace period to get that documentation of the resolution. Just to give you an idea of our timeline, Butler County, they have it on their agenda to approve tomorrow. Clermont County, it's either June 3rd or 10th, waiting on official notification of that. And then Warren County had just approved it yesterday. So once we get all the resolutions.
Why is it the 3rd or the 10th?
It's definitely not the 10th since there's no quorum of the board.
So as soon as we can get that information, or the documentation and the resolutions, we'll get that sent up. So that's the immediate
We did it
process.
For a while, or
The 18th.
we got it on the 18th?
The Butler's doing it tomorrow, and Warren County did it yesterday.
Where did that come to on the 18th?
I have no idea.
That would have come through Connie Tibby with JFS, and then the process from there.
I think the package actually arrived yesterday afternoon.
Okay.
Okay.
So going forward, now we'll kind of go back a little bit. So that gives you what the initial process is, what we have to do regardless of if we're initial or discretionary. So I've requested guidance from the Department of Labor on what to do, because DOL again says you're initial, state says you're not. So pending their response, again, since I have to have the application in, sorry to repeat myself, but since I do have to have the application in Friday, I plan on submitting this as discretionary as we are defined by the state. And then if our application is denied, I will challenge it based on DOL's interpretation. Now, if I get, I'm holding the submission of that until Friday, so that if DOL responds before then, I may have some guidance there. Something else to consider, and Commissioner Humphrey, this is to your point. This is, I'm sorry, oh, I use my handy dandy pointer to make it a little bit easier, although I don't know if it matters at this point or not. Okay, in blue, clearly that's our area, Butler, Clermont, Warren, area 12. In the red is area 13, which is Hamilton County. And then all the white is area 7, and the green is area 1. All those areas, 7, 1, 13, have all qualified for initial designation, and to my knowledge are all applying for initial designation. So what that means is we are bounded by all areas that are initial designation. So we could be initial by default. There's no place for our area to go if all these other areas are already initial. Now, what I say we could be is that the governor's office, after the applications are submitted, the governor's office could come back to, again, Hamilton County and say, we really, really think you would do well if you had Butler, Clermont, or Warren with you. Would you be willing to take them on and you will not lose your initial status? Or actually, Hamilton's a bad example because they're one county. They could go to Area 1, the green, and say, we think Clermont would fit better with Butler, Adams, and Scioto and Pike. Would you be willing to take them on? And if you do, you won't lose your initial status. Because again, in order to be initial, you have to be the same under WIOA as you are in WIA. But if they're willing to take on another county at the request of the state, that won't cost them that designation. So after everyone submits their applications, the state could come back and try to convince commissioners to the local elected officials to modify their applications. So assuming none of the other areas want to take on Butler, Clermont, or Warren, which it's my sense that they don't want to, we should be good to go. So that's why I don't want to rock the apple cart too much with this designation. Why if I don't get any guidance from DOL that says you should go as initial, I will go as the state says we are and hope that we have enough justification, first of all, in the packet to remain our own area, but secondly, hopefully they won't push too hard on getting us to be absorbed, if you will. So now this takes us to the third and final part, which is also the second critical item facing our area, which is the implementation of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And since this legislation impacts more than just the WIB, I thought I would take this opportunity just to provide you with some highlights of the act as well, just so you're informed and educated on the impact this will have on your county. So again, similarly, we'll talk about some background. This was signed into law on July 22nd, 2014, which replaced the Workforce Investment Act of 1998. Some provisions of this act go into effect on July 1st, 2015, with a full implementation July 1st of 2016. So the purpose of the act, there's a 2-page fact sheet that I can provide you with that goes over some grandiose language about how it's effective and gives flexibility, but honestly, you can break it down into 3 legitimate points. The act really tries to focus and increase on opportunities for individuals with barriers, those with disabilities and disadvantaged youth. It works to further align the workforce investment, education, and economic development systems. And then it also has, and this was something that Senator Portman was inflexible on, to provide that we need to provide a hard and fast focus on industry-recognized credential-based training. So if we're going to train someone, it has to be in an industry-recognized training. He was actually the lone holdout on getting this bill signed because he wanted that in there. And it makes sense anyway. So how is this accomplished? How is this accomplished through WIOA? Some of the things are administrative, while other changes are more substantial programmatic changes, if you will. So we'll talk about, but it's all done through the delivery of services, and we'll first talk about some of the more administrative changes. The first part we already talked about, really, and that's the designation of the workforce areas through consistent of labor markets, economic development regions, and then having access to the appropriate resources. The other component is instituting planning regions. So this is where I talked about a little bit about not rocking the apple cart. Part of the issue that the governor's office has in the Office of Workforce Transformation is Area 12, Butler, Clermont, Warren counties, and Area 13 have some starkly different policies when it comes to funding our on-the-job training accounts and our occupational training accounts. So, for example, Area 12 provides up to $15,000 in training for occupational skills training. By comparison, Hamilton County provides only $5,000. So that's a pretty big difference. Area 12 also does a rigid 50% reimbursement rate on the on-the-job training grant up to $8,000. Hamilton County does a sliding scale, so they could go up to, I think it's 90% reimbursement, and they only reimburse, again, I think it's up to $3,000 for their on-the-job training. So there are some differences for 4 counties that neighbor each other and that can deal with similar employers. So part of what I'm going with here and including in this packet, and have been talking to the Office of Workforce Transformation and the Office of Workforce Development, is that I've engaged Area 13, my counterpart Sherry Marshall, and talking about, can we get a policy group together to see how we can further align our policies. We don't have to be exactly the same, but can we narrow that gap a little bit more? And that goes to part of WIOA, which is instituting planning regions, which is to promote consistency of services between local areas. And my hope is if we can show that Area 12 and Area 13 as separate areas can work together, can provide consistent levels of service, that'll help us when we apply for designation as our own separate area, that we can work together but still be separate and serve the unique needs of our employers and our job seekers. And then another component of this is competitively procure the Ohio Means Job Centers. This has a direct impact on you, the Board of Commissioners. Under WIA, you had the freedom and flexibility just to designate who you wanted to operate your Ohio Means Job Centers. So if you wanted Judy to have the Ohio Means Job Center, you could just designate that. Under WIOA, that must be competitively bid. There's no option. And to make that even more complicated, now the state has loosened its grip on this a little bit, but there has to be an arm's length, basically, I'm sorry, the word escapes me, arm's length separation. So the way it was being talked about before was if your Ohio Means Job Center is underneath your Job and Family Services, which is underneath your Board of Commissioners, you can't have anything to do with the RFP. It would be a conflict of interest. So then we had to figure out, okay, how can we release the RFP if you want your Job and Family Services to bid on this, to bid on the RFP. The state has since loosened its rein on this. Currently, it is only if you have anything to do with administering the program itself. So essentially, Job and Family Services oversees the Ohio Means Job Center, so they have some oversight in that program administration. It stops there. So the Board of County Commissioners can now issue the RFP. They're not going to take that arm's length all the way up. So that is a benefit. Now, the local board typically is responsible for issuing RFPs as it relates to this, but if again, this is another wrinkle in the process. If your Workforce Investment Board is underneath your Job and Family Services, as ours is, we can't have anything to do with the RFP. So what we have to do is Fortunately, there is no freedom and flexibility that your board can do. Your board staff can do that. If you wanted to throw that under Andy could do that. I can. Oh, thank you. I do what I can. I'll be here all night. So the problem is, though, we need to work with how you construct the RFP, because your Ohio Means Job Center can't have anything to do. They can't work with you in crafting that RFP. That was Hamilton County got an audit finding for having their for doing something very similar. So we just have to work with that. And I'm sorry I've been belaboring this longer than I should. This is just something I wanted to bring to your attention. And then, well, we talked about certification of the local boards as well. Now we'll go into more of the programmatic changes. So that was the administrative changes under WIOA. Some of the programmatic changes, and we're going to carve this out. And I'll be brief. I apologize if I'm going on longer than I intended to. But the programmatic changes are broken into two categories: adult, which includes your dislocated, displaced or dislocated workforce, and then your youth as well. There aren't as many changes with the adult program. Really, we talk about the first. I'll just hit the first two bullet points here. The sequence of services is no longer required. So what that means is, under WIA, if you come into the Ohio Means Job Center, you have to go through you have to go through a sequence of services before you can actually be funded for training. So it's what's called core, intensive, and training. So you come in and core services, you come into Ohio Means Jobs, Clermont County, you have to show that you have done some job search on yourself, some self-assisted services, and those are core services. You've done that, you've shown that you've looked for a job yourself, but you're still unable to find a job. Then you can go to the next level, which is called intensive services, and that's where there's more staff involvement. So that's where TED staff would be more involved in helping you find employment, maybe identifying what your barriers are, or doing an assessment, an educational or a skills assessment. If you still can't find a job after that, then you're eligible for training services, and that's where we will fund training. Enroll you at Live Oaks or Grant Career or UC or something like that. What WIOA does now is eliminates that sequence of services, so you can come in and immediately receive funding for training without having to go through any other type of sequence of services. And then shared assessments, and this is more for just efficiency's sake. So if the same participant is enrolled in ABLE, that would also come into the Ohio Means Job Center. Let's say ABLE performed an assessment on them last month, and then they come into the Ohio Means Job Center, and we would perform a similar assessment. We can use the assessment that was done by ABLE. So it prevents that job seeker, that participant, from having to jump through bureaucratic hoops to get services. Now we'll just jump into the youth program here, because this is where a large part of the program. I'm
Are
sorry.
these important, these last three bullets? Take the time to review those or not? Let's go ahead and take the time.
Sure.
Is that
Okay,
okay with my fellow commissioners?
that's fine.
Let's take
that's
the
fine.
time to review those.
So emphasis on helping low-income or basic skills deficient individuals. This kind of just goes back into to one of the first components of WIOA, which is a focus on those those that are disadvantaged, disabled, or low income, or disadvantaged youth. Transitional jobs. So this is an interesting focus. Typically, they haven't wanted to allocate funds or resources to individuals who really aren't going to stay in a job very long. One of our, actually two of our performance metrics are entered employment and retained employment. This really goes against the employment retention component, but what they're looking at here is if you're maybe an ex-offender, or you're someone who you really need some assistance just to even get into a job, even though it's not the job you're going to live with, they're actually putting some allocation here that would allow us to have some flexibility in getting people in a job knowing that it's not going to be their career, that just gets them a skill set they need so that they can move on. So they call that transitional jobs. And the last one, I guess this is really more, I hate using buzzwords, but career pathways. It's been a focus under WIA. They're also promoting under WIOA, but really, so if you come in and you don't have a GED, you don't have your high school diploma. So we enroll you into an ABLE program to get your GED. Let's not let it stop there. what do we do from the next standpoint? Once you get your GED, then what do we do to get you enrolled to the next step? How do we get how do we get you a skills upgrade beyond that to get you self-sufficient? So when we talk about career pathways, it's just the step to get you from beyond entry level. Any questions?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so the next part is the youth program, and this is where a large part of the changes are. One of the larger things is the age range for youth increases from 21 to 24 years. So youth is now 16 to 24. And there is one of the other large impacts of this is an emphasis on what we call serving out-of-school youth versus serving youth that are currently enrolled in school. Currently, there's a mandate that we spend 30% of our funds serving out-of-school youth that are out of school. That now changes under WIOA from 30% to 75%. That is a huge change. That is a huge shift in how you administer that youth program. A lot of
School youth meaning having graduated or
dropout.
dropped out?
Yep.
Okay, dropped out. Thank you.
And it could be, I mean, you could be graduated as long as you fall within, and this is where the window opens now, and this is why they've opened the window from 21 to extending that to 24. If you meet an income guideline or other parameters, you could have graduated and still be eligible for youth funding. But typically, the focus is on those that are a little harder to serve, if you will. There are a lot of areas across the country that, we'll take Indiana for example. This is going to be much more difficult for them than it will for us because their primary focus is in school youth. So this is a huge shift for them. For us, I've done some research over the past 3 years. Our area serves about, I think it was 63% out of school youth. So we're not that far from the 75%. But it will be a little bit of an adjustment for us and for our youth providers. 20% of the funds also need to be are required to be spent on work-based activities, which isn't something that's mandated now. So this is a change in that program as well. There's also an emphasis on an achievement of a diploma credential that go towards an in-demand occupation. So the state has identified its in-demand occupation list, which honestly, in my opinion, carries everything under the sun except for barbers. But the emphasis is on getting youth enrolled in programs that will lead to a credential that is on the state in-demand occupation list. And then the program elements, so there are currently 10 program elements under our youth program. I apologize, I don't know them by heart. But they have increased that from 10 to 14. Some of those program elements are new, some of them have been amended, and some of them are retained from what they are now. So coming to the end of our presentation here, and some of the considerations that we need to be aware of under WIOA is with what counties should we partner? This relates to designation of our local workforce development area. Did we want to remain as Butler, Clermont, Warren County, or did we want to go beyond that? Or did you not want to be part of Butler, Clermont, Warren, or did you want to involve some other? We've had those discussions and have determined that we want to remain as Butler, Clermont, Warren counties. And then we can work with our partner areas underneath a planning region type of aspect. And then how will local board membership change under WIOA? So this is an interesting one. Our board is currently, I think it's 36 or 37 members strong. And to be very candid, not all those members are engaged. We did some quick analysis. I think each county has maybe 6, 7, or 8, we'll say 7 on average, private sector board members per county. About 3 from each county show up at each meeting. So we have some members that just aren't engaged. And the way our membership works is you have to be at least 51% private sector. And then there are also other mandated partners from labor, government, education, that are on there. So the more of those mandated partners you have to have, that brings up the number of private sector members you have to meet that 51% mandate. So what has happened under WIO is they've actually reduced the number of mandated partners to allow us to streamline our board and make them more effective. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. We've gotten some guidance on where we can go, and we are currently working with our economic development entities and our Ohio Means Job Centers to identify who basically what private sector members should be on the board and get new direction with that. And we will go from a 37 member board to a 19 member board. So this will really allow our board to be much more effective in how we can conduct business and administer programs. The interesting thing is too, each county will have about 2 counties will have 4 private sector members, 1 county will have 3. And it works out quite well because, as I said, each county right now has about 3 or 4 private sector members that are engaged and show up anyway. So basically, this is a way for us to carve off some of those that don't really show up or aren't engaged. Another consideration is how will the local board engage in regional planning? This was something we talked about before, so engaging our other areas that we border and say, how can we deliver our services a little more consistently? Talking to Hamilton County and saying, let's develop a policy group that meets to see how can we get our policies a little more in line. We've also been engaged with our area, Hamilton County, Northern Kentucky, and Southeast Indiana on a regional training plan, which is required under WIOA. Employers First had acquired a grant to bring in a consultant who is working on developing a regional plan for this area, which will be presented to our economic development, and we'll invite our board of commissioners as well once this takes a little more fruit. We've had one planning meeting already, but once this really starts to come to fruition, then we'll have more of a gathering of the community to deliver the plan and provide input as well. And then how the local board procure the OMJ Center operator, we discussed that as well. And then how does the youth program shift its priority to serving out of school youth? So this is something we need to work with our youth providers, and they have been engaged in this process. Every time that I'm made aware of a training opportunity for a WIOA or youth, I push that out to our youth providers so they're aware of what's going on also. But this is just something we need to be aware of, is how are we going to shift that priority, because it is a change in how the program's administered. With that, I now open this up to any questions, and everyone, when they do the question slide, they have to have some cutesy little thing. And I thought this one was seemed the most accurate, because with designation and WIOA, I do feel like this is getting closer and closer and closer around my neck. So any questions on anything that I haven't gone over, or questions that you just had in general?
Well, I know one thing on the local board membership too is that the 3 county commissioners, commissioners from each of the 3 counties will no longer be on the board, but will be on the executive committee which I've never heard the term, of voting ex officio members. But that's one of the changes too. And also want to let you know that I was speaking to Congressman Winstrip over the weekend, and I was complaining to him, Department of Labor standards, as far as we have a vet rep in our one-stops, and they are only allowed to deal with veterans that have a barrier to employment. So if you just come back and you get out of the military and you go there, they can't, essentially they screen you enough so they don't want you to go to the vet rep unless you have an extreme barrier to employment. Well, hopefully that's going to change now, because subcommittee in the House has passed amendment that would take those requirements out of Department of Labor and put that under Veterans Administration, who will write the rules. So hopefully then it would be a little more friendly to the veterans.
That's much needed, and since you brought that up, I'd like to give you an example of that, of something very recent. Last week, I received a call from Ohio Means Jobs, Butler County. Yes, we've got a veteran who has identified a barrier, PTSD, and the type of job they were looking for guidance on. Do we need to get a medical release for this individual? Our veterans representative said you probably should get a medical release to make sure he can have this specific type of job. But they said, we don't know if we can do that or how we should do that. Can you provide some guidance here? And I said, well, the first step, if he's identified a barrier that he's PTSD, you need to refer him to your veterans representative. That's what he's there for. If they've got an identified barrier, that's step one. Step two is contact that employer and just in general, don't give any specifics. Just say, do you require medical releases for veteran or for any individual with PTSD? If they say yes, okay, then you need to go further. If they say no, then get the veteran in the training and get them in front of that employer. So they went back and they referred the individual, the veteran, to the vet rep, and they said, no, this isn't a barrier that I see. You still need to handle them. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So thank you for having that conversation. One of the things that we hear about as well, we had a recent, the state of Ohio, the state of Ohio had a recent audit, data validation audit, and they picked 4 counties to go to. And one of the things that they were specifically looking at were veterans that bypassed the local staff to go to the veterans rep. And they said, that's a no-no. You can't do that, which is it's lunacy. So hopefully that gets traction. And if there's anything I can do to assist with that, sharing this story or other stories, getting with our local Ohio Men's Job Centers to get those types of stories, hopefully that would help.
Well, I think it's gonna pass. I understand the Department of Labor was not happy about it.
Well, it's not. I'll share my. Just it doesn't make sense. The puzzle pieces don't fit. Any other questions, comments?
Well, I know one change that's going to happen too is the fact that there'll be a change in administrative and fiscal entity too. Is that Clermont no longer is going to be, it'll either be Butler or Warren, and so that would be to take effect by July 1, and so that'll be a change.
So I'm back on our submittal of our approval. Application must be submitted by May 29th. Got a two-week extension of that. Sent to the appropriate county staff of the Board of County Commissioners the week of May the 18th, which could have been Friday the 22nd if it's the week of the 18th. And when was it sent? Was it the 18th or the 22nd?
I will look back at my
It was the
email.
21st.
I got the email.
Okay.
It was sent to Connie on the 21st. She forwarded to the prosecutor's office and to our office on the 22nd.
Okay.
So I think Alan may have been out of the office, and then we had the holiday on Monday. It had been sent on the 18th. We might have had a chance to get it on the agenda this week, but being the end of the week, that's very difficult.
And there was one component that we were still waiting for. So we talked about how the area has to, I forget what the exact terminology is. Has the funds basically to administer. There was information I was waiting for from our fiscal agent, which I didn't get until Tuesday to complete that packet. Once that was completed, then it was sent out to each county.
Okay. So June 3rd is, we can make the June 3rd meeting,
have to.
we think?
We have to.
Okay.
Yeah. So we don't have a June 10th.
We don't have a June 10th meeting, so, and June 3rd will meet your timeline?
June 3rd will be great. I'll actually be out of town beginning June 5th, so that would be preferred if it were June 3rd, and I can get copies of the resolution.
It's the only chance we got.
Great.
It's either today or June 3rd. Those are our next 2 meetings, right? Unless we have a special meeting.
We actually have a meeting on June 1st at 1:30,
Oh,
Okay,
Oh.
but I think we're looking at trying to meet this deadline by the 3rd, is what.
Yeah, if it's ready by the
last
1st, we'll just get it over
if
with.
it's ready by the 1st, but do we think we can get it ready by the 1st, or that's a tough deadline?
It's stamped as being received yesterday, so
It was like late yesterday afternoon, I saw it finally come through. I mean,
So it
we
got
were alerted.
So we got an email on the 21st, the physical stuff got here yesterday and got stamped in yesterday. Okay. So June 3rd is probably, but it meets your timeline, so
Yeah,
that's okay.
They
Okay.
gave us a 2-week extension, which I think is to June 12th.
Okay.
June 3rd,
That would be a.
that would be, and that way I
That's
can.
our do or die, because we don't have a meeting on the 10th. We don't have 3 commissioners available, so. Okay, very good.
Have you had an opportunity to, I know, and we talked about it in the interview as well, getting with the 3 economic development directors in the counties, of going out with them and meeting, some of the businesses so they can be aware of the services you can provide?
Yeah, we've had basically independent conversations with each of them. And to be quite candid with Designation and WIOA, that's where the bulk of my time has been spent. Even with our strategic plan that we adopted, there haven't been a lot of the areas there that I've been able to hit, which that would fall in line with. Once we get our designation approved and that kind of process is off our back, and we can get some more of the stuff with WIOA behind us, I'll be able to allocate more of my time to those types of initiatives.
Okay. I know that's important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, I don't have, any other questions?
Mhm.
Mr. Ebel?
Thank you.
Anything else we need in informal session?
Unaware of, sir, no.
Okay, then we'll conclude informal session. Thanks for joining us. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You don't need to,
Not-
you can
not-
adjourn us.
Okay, I will adjourn us. I get confused about that. Then we will adjourn. Thanks for joining us, and God bless.